Peace, family. Welcome to another episode of We Charge Colonialism podcast and book club. I am Makimba, head writer and researcher for We Charge Colonialism.
Morning, family. This is Tierney Cherie. I am the director of We Charge Colonialism.
Good morning, family. This is Frank. I am the host for the Revolutionary Repatriation Lecture Series.
All right. We want to thank everyone for tuning in as usual. Make sure that you like and share. Let's get folks on this podcast and book club and join this discussion with us. We Charge Colonialism is a anti-colonial institution fighting against the miseducation of African people through the media, through the education system, of course. And so, when we say African people too, Frank, can you let folks know what we mean when we say Africans?
Come again. I was muted. Come again.
Yeah, I was saying we're fighting for against the miseducation, misinformation put out to African people. And I was saying, what do we mean when we say Africans for the listeners?
When we say African, we mean African, both home and abroad, on the continent and in the diaspora.
Indeed. So, we got a good read for everyone. Today we're starting with Jalil Mutakeen's We Are Our Own Liberators. There should be a link for everybody to click on and follow us in the second half of this podcast and book club. We're going to be reading the introduction on page 3. Also, in addition to that, we're going to go through our weekly roundup. But I think there has been some recent stuff in the news, not the mainstream news, but there has been a split in the Afrocentricity community and or movement. And so African Centricity International, I think is the group.
Afrocentricity
International has disassociating themselves with Dr. Molefi Asante, and for what I gather, it has something. I'm sure there's probably other things too, but I was reading something in regards to Dr. Asante's position on race, using race as a organizing tool, and sort of, I guess he see himself trying to distance himself. Well, one thing he says, it doesn't have a place in scholarly circles or in academia, and I guess it's this argument of just race really not being a material thing, being an illusion, and so I guess he sees himself as transcending from this idea of race, which I find interesting. And so what I read also is his willingness to adopt, I guess, a concept such as Afrocentric futurism, Afrocentric queer theory, Afrocentric humanism. So I don't know how much that has to do with them wanting to dissociate with him, but I guess it's him being able to accept these different concepts while still saying we shouldn't use race. So it's sort of like a contradiction right there. But my thing, just to keep it brief, is that even though race is a social construct, our material conditions has been a result of this idea of race. And so the colonizer, the imperialist, has been able to use race as a means of justification, as a means of rationalizing our position within the international political economy. And so based off of that, they're organizing around this concept of race. So whether we think it's an illusion or not, doesn't matter, because our material conditions is an effect of that social construct. So I don't know if y'all have some thoughts on it as well.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. We understand race is literally something that was created by the white man for the purpose of dividing and conquering the indigenous world. We understand that it's a creation of colonialism. And I do think that there should be discussion on where we should put race. This is why me personally, I make more of an intentional effort to emphasize my African identity, understanding that yes, we identify the Black identity as a result of our oppression, but also understanding that our Africanness is something that we've had long before the white man ever decided that he was going to go in and conquer. But at the same time, we can't ignore that reality. We can't ignore the institutions of race. We can't ignore the global institutions, the economic institutions, legal institutions. And I'm all for moving more towards a ethnic identity than a racial identity, but that cannot be achieved without the eliminating of white supremacy and racism. And so, I definitely think kudos to Afrocentricity for making that distinction for the people. And it's just a reminder that movements movements are not going to be the individuals, but are the principles, adhering to the principles, staying true to your principles, and not making it central about a person. And I think that they did a great thing by showing that their movement is not about one person, but it's about the principles that they stand for. It's about the work that they do. And so I thought that was a good move on their part.
Frank, did you have any thoughts?
I mean, just to add to that, like yesterday when I was on mine, how they call it, live stream, some of the things that we discussed there, that where the United States Congress, was trying to talk about slavery, and they says racism, in order for them to come up with slavery, they have to create a narrative, of race. So there were also, it came from, they created a narrative of race, to justify or to try to put themselves in a position of being the superior being, and then putting Black people, in a position of being the inferior being. And once they did that, that came out, and then they came out with the theory, of race, of racism, and all of those things. So they created all these things to try to identify certain people, to put certain people in a very, form of category, in order to continue to look down on them, and to continue to oppress them. So that is I think for me, is a very good, area to look at as well, because some of the things that we use, it did not really come from African people. It came from the colonizer, it came from the enslaver, and these are some of the things that they did in order for them to be able to hate us, or to be able to hate other group of people.
Yeah, thanks for that, man. Just thinking about this, it's just like this. Dr. Malefic Assante's position, anybody who adopts that would set us back, hundreds of years, I think, if we was to adopt the position or his stance right now. Because it's like every problem we face as African people, because we're African people, if we're going to organize and solve it, that's going to be on our mind. Like, what can we do for that? Because it's so we can't even escape it, even if we want to. But I think that was it was good to bring this topic up, basically. So we can move on to the weekly news. Uganda. Frank, you wanted to talk about Uganda. You came across something in regards to reparations. You're on mute.
Let me see if I can share it quick, because I don't want to spend much time on it, because I know we talked about it before. So I just want to point out a few things, and then we can just discuss it. So we talked about this before, but I thought to bring it out again. The UN Court High Commission charged Uganda for her involvement in DRC Congo. So let me just read here quick. It says, let me see here. All right, no, here. All right, it says the United Nations Top Court has ordered Uganda to pay the Democratic Republic of Congo 325 million in reparation over a brutal war between the neighbor that began in the late 1990. But there is something I want to read as well. Let me see here. So, okay, so it says, the court broke down the compensation into different category of damages. It assessed 225 million for loss of life and other damage to persons that include rape, conscription of charged soldiers, and the displacement of up to 500,000 people. Okay, then say it assessed other 40 million for damage to property and 60 million for damage to natural resources. This is what I really want to talk about, to natural resources, including the plundering of gold, diamond, timber, and other goods by Ugandan forces or rebel they supported. All right, so let me take this out right here. All right, so the United Nations, tried to charge Uganda for the involvement in DRC Congo, and the 325 million, they kind of split it out. So some going to damages of land, mining area, and so forth. So the question then becomes I would say there's a good initiative, but however, it's still hypocrisy. So is there only Uganda forces in DRC Congo? So there are a lot of foreign entities, foreign businesses in DRC Congo doing the mining, destroying the land, doing illegal mining and so forth. So is the United Nations going to go after them? Or is the United Nations also going to go after Paul Kagame, Rwanda? Because Paul Kagame was also involved. So why the United Nations Court is not involving Paul Kagame in a situation here? Is it because they are afraid that Paul Kagame will point them out of the genocide committed in Rwanda as well? Paul Kagame will point out France, because France have already acknowledged that she was involved in the genocide in Rwanda. So, or is it because if they do it, they're going to point out the United States or the CIA or the FBI that also trained both Paul Kagame and Museveni? So what is going on here? So there are a lot of foreign entities in DRC Congo. So why would the UN just go for this one nation and leave all the other forces out? So they have how they call it, foreign ammunition that are floating in DRC Congo. So why is the UN not doing investigation to see where these military weapons coming from proliferating in DRC Congo? Because I believe it's not coming from Uganda. Uganda do not make those kind of weapons. So they are all coming from overseas and so forth. So I think the United Nations need to go back to readjust her decision, and also because the United States as well need to be here accountable for the atrocity in DRC, and even France or Asia or Great Britain, Germany, they all need to be here accountable for the atrocity committed in DRC. So the United Nations, is a hypocrite. It's not being fair here, going after just Uganda.
Yeah. I mean, I appreciate you bringing this story up. As you were speaking, I was just laughing just because of colonialism. Like if you're going to talk about reparations for these things, like African countries, not even just DRC, African countries need reparations for the looting that took place before flag independence, no offense, but, and also, I mean, the looting that took place that continues to this day. So, but at the least, we can go back to the colonial period, because it even has that term placed on it in that relationship that Africans had with Europe. They know it was colonialism, right? They'll write about it in the books. And they'll show to romanticize what took place after Africans won their independence. But I mean, definitely, I think like there is a contradiction right here, and it's laughable. I think like, okay, Uganda, they may have an argument, but I feel like that has to be taken care of internally. And I know we're not there yet, you know, but we have to get to that point where it's just like, we don't need to go to the outsiders to talk about what we need to do and our issues with each other. Taryn, you have something?
Yeah, I just think the United Nations is disgusting. I mean, the idea that you start with Uganda, I mean, what about, like you both pointed out, there's a long list of real substantive and lasting impacts from colonialism and slavery and the transatlantic slave trade that African people are very vocal about right now, that African people are trying to get justice for. The Caribbean and Namibia, all over. You're hearing people talking about what happened inside of the Mau Mau rebellions. And out of everyone, you want to go to Uganda as being the first one. Before you even talk about any type of African nations that need to give reparations, you have a long list of European nations that you have to go through. And, you know, as Frank did point out, you know, I don't know how you fault Uganda and skip over Rwanda. They were partners inside of the civil wars in the 90s. And so that's just crazy. But they're disgusting. We know that the United Nations, what they've done in the Congo themselves, we've seen the overturned vehicle with the minerals coming out of it. We know they're not there for what they say they're there for. So we just need to be clear as African people and stop going to them to figure out our problems, as Ikemba said, because they really are purveyors of confusion inside of the African continent. They're not there to mediate. They're there to worsen the divides. They're there to take advantage of us. And so we have to be very straight in our understanding that those are not our friends, and that we have to really look internally to heal the divides that have been caused from the colonial system.
Indeed. Again, appreciate you bringing up that story. Tierney, you have an interesting story you want to talk about?
Oh yeah, I'll share my screen as well. Let's go over. All right, so in Zimbabwe, and just to remind everyone, Zimbabwe, we're having a convention hosted by the country of Zimbabwe. So we'll talk about that, I know, at the break, but I always have to remind everyone that Zimbabwe is a country that's hosting because it's one of the few countries in Africa that has been a zone of liberation among all these places where the Europeans just go in and devour. So interesting story. So Zimbabwe is cracking down on NGOs that could impact their election. So Zimbabwe is pressing ahead with a controversial bill that critics say seeks to criminalize the operations of non-governmental organizations working in the country, according to senior level. Oh, wait, I just noticed it's not actually. Is it on my screen? Okay, yeah, sorry. According to senior level government officials, amendments to the Private Voluntary Organization Act is designed to stem illegal money coming into the country under the guise of NGO funding, but is allegedly, excuse the background, used to push political agendas and political lobbying. The country's ruling party, ZANU-PF, has been suspicious of NGOs routinely accusing them of working with hostile foreign countries to push what it calls a regime change agenda. In recent days, members of the public have been invited by Parliament to share their views on a proposed amendment, but violent interruptions have marred these public gatherings by what rights groups say are ruling party activists eager to see the bill pass into law. So I'm actually going to stop here. I encourage you all to read the whole article. It's Zimbabwe crackdown on NGOs could impact election observation. This is something that I think is very important and significant. So Zimbabwe has been marred with a flood of NGOs that come in and try to push for regime change, going back to when Robert Mugabe was the president. Some of the prominent, so if you to visualize what type of NGOs are throughout Africa, you think about the Gates Foundation, you think about Open Society Initiative. That's one in Zimbabwe that has been heavy pushing for regime change. Doctors Without Borders. There's so many of these big organizations that we know go in and out of the African continent, and they get to say that they're human rights community. In fact, I do want to go from one quote. If I go back to the article, I just remember, because the human rights community, they're the ones that are saying that they're being harmed. Let me see if I can find that quote. It says, okay, the remarks were quickly met with widespread condemnation from the humanitarian sector in a country where millions of people survive on NGO assistance, including sexual reproductive health, food, and education. But these are the things that are used really by the system to try to justify their presence in Africa. First of all, the humanitarian aid community, you're not a citizen of Zimbabwe. You're not a citizen of the African continent. You are a foreign entity. So you have no right to tell the people of Zimbabwe what they want to do with their election processes. So just the goal of these European oppressors coming into the African continent thinking that we have a right to talk about what we're going to do inside of your country and you cannot disturb that. No, you are here because we allow you to be here. So you see the goal of these people. They're very arrogant. They think they have a right because they're being backed by the European colonizers. They're being backed by the United Nations, backed by foreign governments. And so because of that, they think they can talk to the people about what their presence is why their presence is warranted in the African continent. And no, it's not. It's absolutely not warranted. Kudos to Zimbabwe. I hope that they absolutely expel these groups. They've done nothing but, again, cause confusion. That's what they're there for. They say they're there for reproductive health, for food security. Well, why is it that you can't name one country that has these types of organizations inside of it that is actually better with these issues that they say that they're here for? There's no country that's more food secure from the Gates Foundation. There's no country that's more food secure or more healthy for women because of the Open Society Initiative. So clearly you're there for something else. And we, again, know that it's a fact. These NGOs do fund a lot of the protests against the ruling party inside of Zimbabwe, because obviously the colonists have a long-seated hatred for ZANU-PF for taking back their resources, taking back their land from the colonial entities. And so they're always going to try to get them out of power. Until they surrender the land to the European colonizers, they're always going to be an enemy to the humanitarian and the United Nations sectors. And so this is something for us to applaud Zimbabwe for. More African countries need to do this. Eritrea did something similar. They expelled US aid from their country. So we really need to get rid of these aid organizations. They're really just exploitative and just leeches really on African people.
Yeah, I unite with that. I appreciate this story. First thought I want to put out there is that I see the comment African Americans think that they're better and so forth. I disagree with that. Like, you're going to find elitism, wherever you are. Like, of course, like that exists within the African American community, but wherever you are, whether you in the Caribbean or on the continent, you'll find that elitism exists under the system, which has a lot to do with the colonial education. Colonial capitalism has a lot to do with that. And so, back to like the story though, I remember when I was an undergrad, just being naive. I remember I studied about the United Nations, and I was like, yo, I want to do some international work for one of these like NGOs and so forth, non-governmental organizations. And then, I just began to study more and more about them, just understanding that they are an extension of, Western domination. They're trying to make sure that they maintain the status quo. And it's all about like, how can we get these people to adjust to this system of exploitation, helping people. It makes me think like Malcolm X, when he talked about suffer peacefully. How can we get these people to like suffer peacefully instead of just having the mindset that this global economic system needs to go? Like, this is the source of all of our suffering and misery. And these NGOs are not pushing that, or any of these international institutions. It's about how we can maintain the status quo. And it sort of legitimizes the institution when you let them operate anyway within in the country. But I don't know, Frank, if you had any thoughts.
But I don't know. Let me just give a few contributions. Again, these are some of the things that need to remind us, because at the end of the day, I think most Africans even try to misinterpret Robert Mugabe. So I think most of them now, they are beginning to realize what Robert Mugabe stood for. The only thing about Robert Mugabe, his tactics, in how he went about to address the neo-colonialists, his tactics was that he did not involve his people. He did not train the next cadre that would come after him. He did not make things aware to the Zimbabwean or to the African. So he went ahead to deal with the neo-colonialists by himself. So his people could not understand. And then in turn, the neo-colonialists tried to convince his people, that he was the bad person and so forth. But now, again, we can see that Robert Mugabe was not really the problem. He was just fighting for Zimbabwe and fighting for the African people in general, that, he had to suffer what he went through that we did not understand. But now we are becoming to understand, the mindset, the aim of the neo-colonialists and so forth, that even the current president is now taking decision, because this is the same thing they did to Robert Mugabe, and they are doing the same thing as well. And I even learned that, and I'm still doing follow-up. There's a place in Zimbabwe that the United States government want to buy. They are willing to pay billions, not even millions, billions of dollars for that particular area. So if they are willing to pay billions of dollars, just imagine the mineral resources or the resources within that area is a valley. It's almost like a valley area. So just imagine what have been discovered in our place that the Zimbabwe they are not even aware of. So, and the current president is backing off of the idea and saying no. So these are some of the reasons, again, they will come to undermine, right? So they will come to undermine the current president and then take away the aim, what people are thinking about, try to bring some narrative that, oh, there's the reason and so forth, and create chaos and try to remove it and put somebody in regime change, as we all know. But again, let us keep our head up. No solution from the Western world for the imperialists that we should get. They are not coming with any solution. What they're coming in is harmful to the African people, so we should not trust them. Our salvation lies within our hand. It's not within the hands of the colonizer. They are still colonizer, they are still imperialists, they are still enslaver. That's how we should look at them. They have not changed. They are still people who, if you give them the chance, they will enslave African for the second time. If you give them the chance, they will colonize African for the second time. They will dehumanize us, they will rape us, they will castrate, they will burn out. You think about it, they will hang out, they will lynch us if you give them the chance.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, appreciate everybody too with the comments. Continue to put your comments in the chat and like and share as well. Last story we're gonna cover. I came across an article dealing with the Black News Channel or BNC, and this news channel, which was supposed to be catered towards African people or Black people, they are shutting down after 2 years of just like not making any money. They only reached like 10,000 viewers. But what was interesting what was interesting to me about this story was, first of all, like who was the majority owner. So Jacksonville Jaguars, I think the owner of that team's one of the owners by the name of Shad Khan, was a majority owner. This guy, what's his background? I think he's like, Shad Khan. He's from the Middle East. He's not African. He's not Black. I'll leave it at that. It's Pakistani. All right. So you have this Pakistani man who's a majority owner of a Black news channel that's supposed to be geared towards Black people. And he decided that he no longer wants to fund this news channel. And so now it collapsed because of this dependency on someone who's not. So I was watching an interview and they were asking him a question in regards to, his investment and like, why do you think that this is needed for the Black community? He attempted to answer the question, but he couldn't answer it because he doesn't know anything about the Black experience. He's in it for the money. And so he deflected to the Black guy who J.C. Watts. He deflected to this guy J.C. Watts, who was like a former quarterback in college. I think he's not sure what his position is now, but this Black guy, he begins to answer the question. But Shad Khan, as he deflected, he's like smiling, like he had this look in his face, like, shit, I don't know, I'm just here for the money type look. But I guess like what was interesting, like again, I just thought that this was a serious contradiction, having somebody anyway, the outside of the community majority owner of something that's, or even this shouldn't have any ownership anyway. But as I look further into the story, which don't really have time to discuss, it's just like who also was supporting. It was like a conservative leaning media anyway. It wasn't really about liberation, but that's another point of, of discussion. But I'll just pass it on for the sake of time and see if y'all had any thoughts.
Just some quick thoughts. I mean, I wasn't surprised. There's been a lot of attempts by the capitalist system to create Black news channels. I remember, in fact, on BT, I don't know if y'all remember, TJ Holmes had a news show, some type of Black news show. He was like, oh, we're going to talk about issues that affect us. The show, I don't know how long it lasted. It went out really quickly. One, like you pointed out, these are capitalist entities. They're profit driven. Our community needs a certain type of political education that's not going to be done by these types of news stories that are very watered down, that are not about the everyday struggles of African people. And so, yeah, it was really doomed to begin with. Of course, when you have corporate backers who are not devoted to the cause, they can easily dip out. And so that's another reason why we have to be careful when we're trying to adopt these models of business. Really, I think if you're trying to find news at this point as an African person, anywhere, your best bet is or platforms like this. So many of the platforms on YouTube, on the internet that really do to make a sincere effort to not be attached to money, to not be attached to the corporatized system. That's your best bet. Because if you're trying to go to the people who have the backing, more than likely the stories they're telling you are going to be the stories that push the narrative of the dominant society. And so that's why they're getting that backing. So I wasn't surprised, and I'm not really sad either.
Any thoughts, Frank?
No, we can go ahead. I mean, you guys summarize it.
All right. So we're gonna transition to the book, but before that, of course, let's show that promo in regards to let me stop talking with the promo.
I think what we are suffering from is ideological confusion. That is, that we're not clear, we're not thinking clearly, and that we need a context within which to answer the question, is something good or bad? We assume that we have the same goals, but we never say what they are. It's time for us to think and articulate and establish our goals as Black nationalists and Pan-Africanists. We need vision, we need clarity. Otherwise, we can't answer the question, is it good for African people? Nationalist goals is self-determination. In the spirit of Delaney, Garvey, Malcolm, Amos, it is Pan-African commitment, that is the unity of African people worldwide and one Africa on the continent as a basis for African strength. So we are about building a Pan-African world order based on the principles of Ma'at, not in imitation of a European order. Ma'at as justice and truth. We need a nation concept, as Dr. Clark told us. A Black economic program, a cultural program, an independent political organization, independent Black media, independent African-centered education financed by us and controlled by us. All of this presupposes, very importantly, an African Black identity.
Gotta unmute.
All right, so make sure you register for our convention. Register today, get it out the way, and look forward to having you all as participants or attendees of this year's conference happening in Zimbabwe. Or if you can't make it to the continent, you can still participate virtually. So we're going to go to page 3, and We Are Our Own Liberators by Jalil Mutakim, who was a member of the Black Liberation Army, Black Panther Party, as well. I consider him a veteran of both. I'd rather say that than say former. And someone, who put in the work for the liberation of Black people and is still continuously to this day putting in that work, as he was released, I think in 2020, after serving about 4 decades in prison. So, I mean, this is one of our freedom fighters. And so we're getting firsthand account right here. And, we're going to start this book today. So I'll go right into the introduction. We'll discuss. So essentially, the course of our struggle has been defensive, marginally organized, and sectarian. There exists across the country hundreds of revolutionary nationalist cadres and formations. Many of these cadres are members or affiliated with the very few organizations that apply the politics of revolutionary nationalism to our people's national oppression. These revolutionary nationalist organizations, for the most part, have not established a national strategy or a program to galvanize a serious independence movement in this country. Not since the advent of the Black Panther Party have Black people, especially youth, been empowered with the sense of their ability to liberate themselves. Various formations have sought to restore the militant posture and influence the BPP garnered in Black communities across the country. Albeit no single formation has successfully evolved either the organization or the political momentum that the former Black BPP developed between 1966 and 1975. Nevertheless, revolutionary nationalist formations must be credited for their continued noble efforts in the struggle for national liberation. The FBI's COINTELPRO operations and reactionary forces destroyed the Black Panther Party. These same entities continue to sow seeds of this dissension in an effort to deny Black people self-determination. The various existing revolutionary nationalist formations have sought to keep the spirit of militant resistance and struggle alive. They have brought the issue of political prisoners of war before international tribunals, all of which lead to the creation in 1998 of the Jericho Amnesty Movement. Pan-Africanism has broadened the understanding of the global nature of white supremacy. As more Black people understand the similarities between the old South African system of apartheid and U.S. institutional racism. More Black people are making the link between themselves and Africans on the continent as Maiafa rituals are growing more prevalent, seeking to bridge the cultural void. Furthermore, the issue of reparations is now in a bill pending before the U.S. Congress, and as the issue grows, Blacks in America and Africans on the continent will seek to merge in their common interest to resolve the reparation struggle. In respect to the issues of reparations, it addresses more than compensation for inhumane exploitation suffered during the Atlantic slavery trade. It addresses the socioeconomic condition Black people presently suffer and argues against U.S. government's inequitable distribution of wealth. Ideological and political discussion of our existence in America has been, for the most part, subject to ideas of integration and assimilation, absent the demand of reparations. The ideological/political argument for reparations offers debate on the historical condition of being in America and what has evolved since the 13th Amendment ended chattel slavery. It offered greater historical analysis based upon an understanding of national identity in opposition to African American assimilation and acculturation. It seeks to hold the U.S. government and corporate entities with direct relations with the Atlantic slave trade conditionally responsible for the socioeconomic disenfranchisement of Black people. This struggle qualifies the argument that there exists a neo-colonial relationship between Black people and the American government based on the history of slavery and national oppression. Ultimately, reparations bring to the debate a human rights issue of independence and nationhood. I can stop right there. I think a lot was said. This is an introduction, and I think he's laying out a lot right here. He's making some points too in regards to like the reparations. That kind of stuck to me. He was saying some things prior to that as well about the merging though of Africans in the United States. And that's a perspective that he's coming from, right? He's part of this struggle that's taking place within the confines of the U.S. empire. But the way that he's viewing it, he's seeing a merger, though, taking place. Like he's having this optimism. I wonder what y'all thoughts are too, especially like in the wake of because this is pre-ADOS. This is this movement, right? So I'm curious to know his thoughts, and he's speaking at the conference on what's happening now, because the way he's seeing it at this time, and I'll get the year of this publication. This is the first edition was in 2000. So he's seeing at this time like we're moving in the right direction. Pan-Africanism is bringing folks together and so forth. Did y'all have any thoughts on that? And I know he said some things about reparations too, but just wonder.
Yeah, for sure. So one, I like that he does talk about the fact that we have not been able to galvanize another movement like the Black Panther Party since that organization was at its peak. And I like after that, he follows talking about the assimilation campaign, because I think that's exactly why we have not been able to have another movement like the Black Panther Party, is because of the idea that America is different now. America has jobs for Black people. You can shop wherever you want. You don't have to deal with the same type of police oppression. Of course, this is what's being said. We know it's the same country. So because you have so many Black people working civil service jobs, so many of us being willing to go inside of different sectors of government, so many of us that feel not the same pressure to organize in a similar type of way, I do think it's very true that a shout out to Impressive Livewire. Thank you for the donation of $10. Thanks so much. Yeah, I think it's very true, a true observation. As far as the coming together of the movements, certainly, I think given that this came out in 2000, it's probably, I'm just looking back on history. I know that at the 2001 conference and UN conference on racism, xenophobia inside of South Africa, that there were similar discussions on reparations. In fact, that was the big thing on the table. You had a big argument. The United States government left, the UK left, Israel boycotted. So they started boycotting because really they were calling for reparations, and also they were condemning Zionism. But at that time, there was really a push for coalition between African nations and Africans in America, and also Caribbean nations, and also indigenous, other indigenous nations who have suffered from colonialism, to push for a centralized agenda when it comes to reparations. And so that was something beautiful that came around that time. And so I do think that the reparations movement could possibly be a tool to Pan-African organization, because we hear it everywhere, probably more than a lot of other issues. We hear it, for example, Frank just did a great video recently when he goes into detail about reparations. He talks about it inside of the Caribbean, coming from Jamaica. Like, so many countries are awoke to what happened in the past and what needs to be done to remedy it. Africans in America, same thing, Namibia. So we're hearing reparations more now than ever coming from different colonized countries. So I do think that could possibly be a way to unite us. I personally am not a fan of the idea that should be our first and foremost goal, because ultimately reparations puts in the hands of the oppressor the ability to say no, whereas revolution, you don't have a choice. You're going to give that money regardless. So, but as a tool to organize, absolutely, I support that.
Yeah. We knocking in the door, taking what's old. Frank, you want to add something?
Yeah, like what Tiani said, and I spoke about it yesterday, and exactly this is what the book is telling us. And from what I got from the book is telling us that in order to actually to get reparation, it have to be through revelation, and that is by African people coming together. If we don't do that, it's not going to work, because what happened here is the reparation that we are asking for is coming from the colonizer. The money is coming from there. It's not coming from us. It's not coming from a neutral entity, or it's not coming from a bank that is owned, that is neutral. It's coming from these people. So the book is telling us, if we can't unite, we can't get it. And the book is telling us that unity is the key to African problem. If we want African problem to be solved, African people, both women and abroad, we have to unite. It be a united force. That's the only way we can get this reparation issue resolved. And that is why the book is telling us, if we want to get it resolved, we have to come together. We have to unite, and we have to be in one accord, with one voice, with one mindset, because no one is going to fight for African people to get reparation. No one that doesn't look like us will fight for us to get reparation, because other people that got reparation and they are still receiving reparation up to today, it was not African people that fought for them. They themselves fought for it, and they got it. So no one will fight for us, because reparation is coming from the people who did it act against African people. So they will never get reparation because they have not accepted that the inhumane behavior they did to African people. So if I didn't accept, why would I give you something that I didn't accept? So that's just it.
Yeah, I'll just throw in, I'm looking at the chat, and yeah, I absolutely agree. Like, without power, any type of reparations you get, it's just going to be a concession. It's going to be a payoff. You know, any power, without power, you know, power has to come if you want real change. So just wanted to comment on that.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, you see, like the the Jews got land with their reparations. Like, and look at them today. So, but moving on to the next paragraph. Also, it is important that the issue of UN-sponsored plebiscite be raised on a national level. That's powerful. This is a method by which the politics pertaining to our national identity are addressed in a national forum governed by international rules of law. However, this task needs to be subject to a report issued by a Truth and Reconciliation Commission that takes testimony regarding U.S. human rights violations as it pertains to COINTELPRO and reparations. Revolutionary nationalist formations should unite to build the means and methods to forge a movement to accomplish these tactical initiatives in condemnation of U.S. crimes against humanity. Revolutionary nationalists across the country agree our people's national oppression requires a national response. This national response should develop with the greatest amount of principled unity amongst as many revolutionary nationalists as ideologically and politically possible. The greater the ideological and political unity, the greater the movement to combat national oppression and racism. Black people in the human rights movement cannot tolerate revolutionary nationalists engaging in internecine struggles. It is of the utmost importance that revolutionary nationalists of all trends and tendencies resolve internal contradictions and develop the independence movement. The plight of Black people in this country demands national representative leadership by revolutionary nationalists. Such leadership will provide understanding and direction encompassing the political idea of national liberation and independence. This means establishing a national strategy inclusive of a socio-economic program for jobs, food, clothing, healthcare, and shelter, the necessities of life many Black people sorely lack. When considering the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, it is more than obvious that revolutionary nationalists must be in a position to ensure the basic needs for Black people are met. The primary question that needs to be resolved is, where is the movement going and what is its ultimate objective? The answer to this question presents another question. How can we best reach our objective goal? Hence, when revolutionary nationalists unite for the express purpose of answering these questions, a national agenda formation strategy will arise from these questions. There has been much rhetoric and propaganda about the conditions of national oppression and racism, about the destruction of capitalist imperialism, but there has been little work toward building what will replace the system of racism and national oppression. What is the national agenda subject to the ultimate objective goals of the movement? In the course of building and sustaining the national liberation movement, how would a national agenda be implemented? As I understand the proposition, there are three alternatives in answer to the prevailing question. Are we to fight for integrated social democratic capitalist America? Are we to lead the fight to build a multinational nationalist socialist United States? Are we to fight for domestic self-determination and independence of the Republic of New Africa? So just to stop there, there's a lot to talk about right here, but I guess like one thing there's a lot that really stuck out to me, but I don't know, like my position though with the whole national, I get like the national struggle, but I want to hear, and perhaps we'll get to it at some point in this book, because I can't recall off the top, but just more talk about like the international struggle. Like I feel like our national struggle has to be connected to an international struggle, because even like after independence, or we win the right to self-determination in this country, like I feel like there needs to be this separation though from the current regime. You know what I'm saying? Like if there and it all, like what will revolution look like? Is it going to be the complete dismantling of the American regime? Maybe not in the first stage, right? You know, because there has to, I feel like there's going to be a separation first. That's going to be the first part of the struggle, and then ultimately the whole dismantling because of the threat that they pose, right? So in that first stage of this separation, like who are we building with? Who are we building? You know, I just feel like that international aspect needs to be pushed a little bit more. And from what I'm reading right now, it's just like this, like being in the United States, how are we going to build a relationship with I could be reading, we'll get more into it, but that's what I'm seeing right now. I don't know if y'all had any thoughts.
Yeah, and I like the questions posed because I think every African person, we have to answer these questions. Like, what are we actually fighting for? Are you fighting to integrate into capitalist America? Are you fighting for a socialist America? Are you fighting for a separate America? Are you fighting to leave America? Another important question I think is posed that kind of you alluded to it, Kemba, is well, so this is an interesting discussion. Can we survive as African people sovereign where the American empire still exists, meaning where you have the military industrial complex, you have the CIA, you have AFRICOM, you have all of these national security, and then you have the Israeli intelligence, you have the British intelligence, you have the French intelligence. Can we really survive without confronting these entities first? Can we come together and liberate ourselves first, then confront them? You know, these are all questions I don't know the answers to be honest, but it's important to keep in mind because we have to understand there's multiple layers to liberation. I, for one, am of the, I think I've been clear, you know, on this channel, I'm of the separation avenue, and understanding that the example that he used of Hurricane Katrina, that's a beautiful example. You should never expect that someone who's not you is going to take care of you the way you would. And in that instance, we were basically left up to the mercies of the government. And another thing, I think you read this at some point, but it's kind of like, what is the alternative? So if your focus is, you know, destroying the capitalist system, what's the alternative system that you're going to have in place? That's a very important point, because I think we have to understand we're all dependent on this capitalist system as it stands. Is the capitalist system in America were to fall right now, many of us don't grow our own food. Many of us rely on grocery stores. Me too, you know. Many of us don't know how to hunt. Many of us don't have any other way. So how long would you be able to survive if you couldn't go to your local grocery store? If you couldn't get water from there, you couldn't get food from there, you might be able to survive a couple months. But what happens when a year passes, 2 years pass? So we don't have an alternative system. So many of us are focused on getting rid of the system without building the alternative. And that's something that's absolutely a necessity when you're talking about liberation.
Any thoughts, Frank?
You know what I also got from the book, and you know, and the some of the question Tiani was also trying to answer. What I got from that is that we as African, we have to be clear of what we want, and if we are clear of what we want, we cannot compromise anything of what we want, and we have to stick to it. And like I mentioned yesterday in my video, and I want to mention that again, where the people in Jamaica, in that part of the world, put in for reparation from the Queen. And the prince who went there for the Jamaican to celebrate the 70-year anniversary with the people, if to say the time she spent on our throne, if it had any impact on the life of the Jamaican, there's no impact on the life of Jamaican. There's no impact on the life of the people that live in the Bahamas. But once the people start requesting for reparation, boom, that's the time they come out and say, oh, we coming for to celebrate the 70-year anniversary of the Queen and blah, blah, blah. The suffering of the people that make the Queen to stay in power for 70 years. So you want me to come and celebrate. And then they came out with another analysis that, okay, we don't have to pay you guys reparation, but this is what we're going to do. We're going to have an international day so that international day will be used to remember your forefather, to remember the suffering, to remember the inhumane treatment that was given to your forefather, so we can remember it. But again, it may seem to be a good idea, but it's not a good idea, because why? That they're going to be used to put money in the pocket of the throne or of the Queen, because African people will use that day thinking that is a day to remember our forefather, and when we use it, take our money and go and buy their businesses, because they are going to come out with merchandise that will look like our forefather or costume and whatsoever you think about. And then we purchase their business and then come home and try to remember our forefather. So instead of them giving a reparation, we intend giving them reparation. So that's not a good idea. And I said it, Jamaica don't agree, and the rest of the world, we're not going to agree for you to come and tell us when or how should we remember our forefather. That is not what, because when we do that, we're going to compromise the reparation. In fact, when we do that again, our forefather will be angry at us, because instead of them remembering, then we are remembering them in a negative way, putting money in the hands of the colonizer, in the hands of their economic.
I guess throw a quick comment to us. I was watching a conversation. Absolutely. Our converse face stars, like, absolutely, we have no excuse, but that's something like now we have no excuse. Like, something I've been very interested in as of late, and I've been learning. So I had a garden last year, but I've been making more of an intentional effort to learn survival, like starting your own fire. I mean, these are things that we would have to know how to do without this system. Are you able to heat your own home? Are you able to do like basic things that we're not used to thinking about? Storing food, canning. I mean, I've just bought a canner because I'm like, all right, like, I don't trust the system to last, especially if you see what's happening with the supply chains in Ukraine and everything. To me, that's a warning shot to African people of what can happen if this system falls and we're not prepared. So it's not just we can't wait for it to happen and quickly learn. We have to be learning the stuff now. You have to be learning how to get your food, how to cook, or even how to barter and trade. Like, these are things you have to be thinking of actively. So whether it's this system that's going to fall or just building alternative systems for our people, this is something that we prepare for ahead of time before we get to the point of no return. So that's just one thing I want to throw in.
Oh, okay. All right. So you started your own fire right now?
I looked up how to no, I'm really like, all the stuff. I'm like, okay, if the system were to fall today, like, what would I not know how to do? So I watched a video. I haven't tried it. I don't know where I would try in my backyard, but just to know, like, how, like, what would I do? Like, having food, like, it's not just growing your own food, it's storing food, because over winter, if you're living in the Northeast, if you live somewhere that has bad seasons, like, what do you do over time? What if you don't have crops for a certain, season? So, it's like thinking long term about survival. Like, that's something that, I'm starting to really invest in mentally and just learn. Yeah.
Yeah, and we all need to follow suit, definitely. So I want to appreciate all of the comments, everybody, keeping the comment section popping, everybody being engaged, for tuning in, for sharing, and continue to be a part of these discussions. We're going to pick back up on chapter 1 next Saturday. So, read through the introductions. It's a really good book. And also purchase the book. Brother Jalil Mutakin is out here putting in work, and I'm sure like these resources could be needed again, like this is somebody who served 4 decades for us, you know, in the name of the African struggle. So want to encourage everybody to become a Patreon member. We have a Patreon account. That's one way you can support us. Oh, and again, Amani Naguvu to Empress Lawire for her support. Appreciate that. But yeah, you can become a Patreon member as well. That's a way to support us. There's going to be some, actually, I'm going to put up a video this week dealing with sort of like the foundation of colonialism, going to talk a little bit about what was going on with Portugal in the 15th century. So, you know, look out for that if you're a member. And again, register. I should have wrote this down. I feel like, am I forgetting anything? Good. Oh, all right. So go onto our website as well. I have an article that I just completed. Actually, we have 2 articles that was just
great article. I'll read it.
Oh, appreciate it. So check that out, man. I was working around the clock trying to get that done. So check that article out on wechargecolonialism.org, and you can one-stop shop. You can go there and register for the convention as well. So appreciate everybody for joining us. Any last words before we peace out? All right, cool. So we see you next week at 10 a.m. Appreciate y'all. Peace.